What's up, guys? Welcome into another episode of the Wolverine Live Recruiting Show. I am your host, EJ Holland. Today, I'm going to be talking about several topics, answering your questions, including a lot of flip discussion. So make sure to like this video, subscribe to our YouTube channel for free, get notifications every time we drop new videos. And if you want even more Michigan recruiting information, if the weekly show doesn't do enough for you, you can always find me over at thewolverine.com, where we have even more Michigan recruiting intel. Sign up today, use the promo code UM1. That's $1 for 2 months over at thewolverine.com. Get exclusive insider information on everything Michigan recruiting, the team, transfer portal, basketball. Plus, we have a great message board community with thousands and thousands of users. So don't miss out. Sign up today. Use that promo code UM1. Before we start tonight's show, I just want to let you guys know that it is presented by our great sponsor, Dollar Shave Club. When you rep your team, don't stop at the jersey. Dollar Shave Club's collegiate razor handles combine grooming with glory, letting students, grads, and fans show their school spirit in style. From the sink to the stadium, shave with school pride. Visit dollarshaveclub.com to grab your college handle today. And as always, Dollar Shave Club supports Michigan and says, go blue. As you can see, great razor here, University of Michigan diamond grip handle, and it is only $8. $8. That's all, man. I mean, my wife sends me to Walgreens to buy razors. I end up paying like $15. So you don't even have to sign up for anything. You can just go to Dollar Shave Club. You can order today for $8. It is limited edition, so make sure to get in on this diamond grip handle. It has the maize and blue colorway, the Block M. It's a great, obviously, razor to have, but also just a great trinket as well. So anyway, visit Dollar Shave Club, get your razor. All right, we are going to be answering the questions in the order in which they came. If you want to skip the line, since we already have a ton of questions in the chat box, leave a super chat. It's the box with the dollar sign. That money goes directly to my travel budget so I can continue to see Michigan recruits across the country. But again, we will answer the questions in the order in which they came. Each user is limited to 3 questions unless you do use a super chat if you want to, again, skip the line or ask an extra question. All right, we'll start off with Zachary Pizot. He says, assuming we flip Jamarion Vincent and Tommy Froman, would we also take Stover and another cornerback if they want to flip? If so, is getting a linebacker off the table? So assuming Michigan gets Jamarion Vincent, who is a corner committed to Baylor, and Tommy Froman, who is an offensive tackle committed to Miami, Ohio, would Michigan also take, let's just go one by one here. Would Michigan also take Sean Stover, who is the 4-star interior offensive lineman committed to Duke, just visited Michigan this weekend? Yes, Michigan does want a center. So even if they get Tommy Froman, who is a tackle and was a surprise visitor this weekend, I think Michigan would still like to have a center in this class. It was always the plan to take a development center, interior offensive lineman before Tommy Froman kind of popped up out of nowhere. And Froman's a true tackle at 6'7". Stover is one of the center candidates, along with Adrian Hamilton, who is committed to Virginia Tech. I had a chance to see Hamilton over the weekend in game. So yeah, they would take one of Stover or Hamilton. I don't know which one Michigan will get, but I do think they will get one. Would they also take another corner aside from Vincent? Possibly, but that's one where we'll have to wait and see how things play out, who the corner is. It would have to be an elite guy. Like if Haven Finney wanted in, they would find room to take Haven Finney or Kari Adams or somebody like that. I don't think there's a world where Michigan doesn't take another linebacker. They only have one committed. That's Markel Dabney. it's an obvious need. They need another linebacker, even if they miss out on like the big fish, like Nick Abrams or Braylon Hodge. They'll take another linebacker. Like they absolutely have to in this class. We do have a $5 super chat from the New Life. How is Michigan looking for D-line and wide receiver recruiting? Well, the incoming class for 2026 has a fantastic defensive line / edge haul. I mean, you look at the pass rushers in this class. Carter Meadows is a 5-star prospect, rivals is number 3 overall recruit in the country. So you can expect big things from Carter, obviously. Julian Walker, if he stays in this class, remember, he did make an official visit to South Carolina this weekend, and his father is a strength coach there. But if Julian Walker stays, that's another top 100 recruit. And then you have Tariq Boney, who really closely resembles Josiah Stewart. Along the interior defensive line, you have Titan Davis, who's a borderline top 100 recruit, Alistair Vallejo, who really rose up the rankings this offseason. So it's a really strong defensive line class this cycle. Now, that is giving Michigan the luxury to be a little more choosy with their defensive line recruiting in 2027. So there aren't a lot of big name interior defensive linemen on the recruiting board just yet. There are some big time pass rushers in 2027. You're talking about Anthony Sweeney, who's a top 100 player, Chris Whitehead, who's a top 100 player. Those are a couple of really highly touted prospects to know. Whitehead being here in Virginia, where Michigan has had plenty of success, and I think that for wide receiver, 2026, you obviously have Travis Johnson, who I think can be an immediate impact player. Zion Robinson, who posts out of this world testing times, and I think if he puts it all together, the sky's the limit for him. So he has a really exciting ceiling. I think Jalen Pyle is more of a depth guy, but both Johnson and Robinson are extremely exciting. And then when you look at 2027, Michigan is in on some big time wide receivers, whether it's Dakota Warren or Quinn Burrell or Matthew Gregory or Monshon Sales. All of those guys have visited here recently. So I think, the wide receiver recruiting will certainly, or it has picked up a little bit here this cycle and will continue to pick up in 27. So we appreciate the New Life for the super chat. And if anybody else wants to jump in with a super chat, we appreciate that too. I'm not sure exactly what happened on my end. Hopefully you guys did not lose me. Okay. So sorry guys. One of my tabs is going crazy. All right, let's go back to the questions in the order in which they came. And Zachary Pizot says, after this weekend's game, rank the odds of getting the big 4 2027 wide receivers and how many you think will actually land. So I'm assuming you mean the wide receivers I mentioned, which would be Sales, Burrell, Gregory, and Warren. I would say the odds, I think Sales will be the toughest to land. There's a lot of competition there, and I think Michigan will have to be ultra competitive with NIL, which I think they will be willing to do in 2027. They know they have to get Bryce some weapons, but I think right now Michigan is playing catch up a little bit with Sales. I think they're in a really good spot with, I would say they're in the top 3 or so for Grant, Burrell, and Matthew Gregory coming out of his visit this weekend. So I think all of those guys, Michigan has a legitimate shot with. Not that they don't with Sales. I just think, if I'm ranking the odds, it would be those 3 guys at the top and then Sales being the least likely. How many Michigan will land? I think they have to land 2. My preference would be to get Gregory in. My preference would be Sales and Gregory. Both are very dynamic, and Sales is a big body with elite speed. You're talking about a guy who, has the track times along with being 6'5". So, think of like a Braylon Edwards type of guy, who somebody like tried to diss Braylon Edwards' speed last week. I mean, I looked at his track times; they were pretty legit. So, if you're looking for a combination of size and speed, Sales definitely has that. And then Gregory runs into 10.4s, which is outrageous. That's elite level speed. Anything sub 10.5 is really eye popping. So those would be my two guys if I had to pick two. But I would want one of them and then one of Burrell or Grant, who aren't, the fastest wide receivers, but are guys who can, create separation, really natural pass catchers, great route runners. So yeah, I mean, I would want a speedy guy and, one of Moran and Burrell. Zachary Pizot says, any steam to Tony Alfred getting the Colorado State job? If Michigan lets him walk, is Savion gone? Obviously, Alfred was mentioned in the preliminary candidate list by our Pete Nakos, which I mean, I would think has some legs to it. Alfred is an alum. He did play at Colorado State. He has been in the conversation for that job in the past, but we'll see. The other opportunities that he had to be in the mix for that job, they passed him over and they hired somebody else. So it'll be interesting to see what that coaching search turns into and who pops up in that search. And the hypothetical that he does get the Colorado State job, how would that affect Savion? I mean, we'll cross that bridge if it comes, but if you force me to answer, I think it would have a big impact. I think, NIL certainly helped. I think Michigan's tradition and of producing running backs and the high level academics and the culture and all that stuff was a big selling point for Savion. But I think Alfred had a lot to do with landing Savion. If Mike Hart was still the running backs coach, I don't think that Savion Hyder would be committed to Michigan right now. So it's definitely important to keep Tony Alfred. Obviously, he does a great job, and specifically for the Savion recruitment. Tyson Smith says, we have a super chat from Sean O'Hara, and he says, which 2026 corners can we most likely flip? Jamarion Vincent has already visited, which is a plus. There wasn't an immediate flip from Baylor, but I do think that Michigan is still strongly in the mix there. I think Michigan will keep pushing and is still, like I said, in a good spot to potentially flip him away from Baylor. I think Haven Finney, the more LSU struggles, the more talks get louder about Brian Kelly, the more I think Michigan has a chance to flip Finney away from LSU. So, I would definitely keep an eye on those guys if we're talking straight up corners. If Michigan decides to look for a Dorian Barney type of replacement, like as a nickel, then, I think Jaziel Hart would be a really interesting option. He was obviously very high on Michigan before he committed to Penn State. Another kid at corner, CJ Brona, who is committed to Florida. I reported last week that Michigan was picking up contact there, and then Billy Napier got fired. So I think things could, progress quickly for Brona. Tyson Smith says, are we still in it to flip Nick Abrams? Yes, he was back at Georgia over the weekend. Georgia is doing everything they can to keep him. I think he really likes the linebacker tradition at Georgia. He has a great relationship with their coaching staff, specifically, the defensive staff. And I think Michigan gave him a lot to think about on the visit and is still swinging hard for Nick Abrams. They are not going to give up on him until signing day. I think the visit to Georgia this weekend certainly helped the Bulldogs, but he hasn't shut the door completely just yet. So Michigan and Brian Jean Mary have some work to do, but Nick Abrams is still a possibility for Michigan. Tyson Smith said, I saw the 27 rankings come out. How would you rank these wide receivers? Monson Sales, Dakota Moran, Easton Royal, Matthew Gregory, Quinn Burrell, who, I talked about earlier. Sales would be 1. Easton Royal would be 2. His speed, we talk about Gregory's speed. Royal ran in I think, I don't know if it was wind aided or not, but he ran in the 10.2s, I believe, in the 100 meter, which is insane. And when I saw him at Future 50, Under Armour has verified laser 40 times, and I think he clocked a 4.3 flat or something crazy like that. So Royal speed is game breaking. So Sales 1, Royal 2, Gregory 3, Morant 4, Quinn Burrell 5 would be how I would put them. Tyson Smith says, what's the best scary movie to watch during spooky season? The best scary movie, I don't know. I don't watch movies. It's rare that I watch movies more than one time. So I don't sit and rewatch the same movie every Halloween or every Christmas. I hate Christmas because it's the same movies. I don't need to see Jingle All the Way 80 times in my life. But if I were to give some recommendations, a newer movie to watch would be Bring Her Back. I enjoyed that one. It's a new A24 film. Veronica is one of my all-time favorites. It's a Spanish language film, so you'd have to put on the subtitles if you don't understand Spanish. And an old school horror movie. I mean, give me Chucky, man. I mean, if I had to rewatch something, it would be Chucky. Or Pet Sematary, because the cat, Church, got to. Ben Ricketts says, who could you see Michigan land at running back in 2027? I think Michigan has put itself in a really good spot coming out of the visit weekend for Traynard Roberts out of Florida. This is a kid that we haven't talked about a lot. He was actually at IMG Academy before transferring to a new school, the Villages. He played with Michigan signees, Caden Strayhorn, Donovan Johnson, or they're not signees, they're on the team now. But Caden Strayhorn, Donovan Johnson, and Nathaniel Owusu-Boateng, the trio that signed with Michigan last cycle. So he's very familiar with Donovan Johnson specifically. They shared the backfield together. And Tony Alfred has done a fantastic job of building an early relationship with Traynard. Michigan was already in the top 5 for him going into this visit, and I think Michigan helped itself a lot. They're going to swing for the fences with Kemon Spell, but Traynard Roberts, I think, is a really realistic name to know for 2027 at the running back position. Ben Ricketts says, any flip targets or increased conversations being had with commits on teams with the recent coaching firings? So I mentioned CJ Brono, who's committed to Florida. He's a Rivals 300 cornerback. Michigan really likes him. Conversations are definitely picking up there. So he's certainly one to know. On the Penn State side, for 27, obviously they're in the mix for Kemon Spell, the number 1 running back for next cycle, and he's visiting for the game against Ohio State. But they haven't had too many conversations yet, or things haven't picked up significantly yet with some of those decommits or guys that are, keeping their recruitment open. So we'll see what continues to transpire. Ben Ricketts says, who has been the most underrated recruiter on staff, position coach, analyst, etc.? That's a good question. I think Chip Lindsey's done a really nice job coming in as the OC, identifying his quarterbacks early, getting them on the boat early. You saw him, even though I'm not a huge Brady Smeagol fan, that's who he identified, and he got him to commit. He got Peter Bork in early. He's helped out with some of the other positions as well. I just don't think you hear a lot about Chip Lindsey on the recruiting trail, but he's out there. He's super active. I still don't think people give Tony Alford enough credit, man. Yeah, sure, NIL was a factor with Savion Hyder, but like I said earlier, if Mike Hart was still the running backs coach, you're not getting Savion Hyder. Mike Hart was the area recruiter in Virginia and didn't even offer Savion Hyder. I don't know, man. That's insane. So I think that Tony Alfred does a fantastic job, and did a fantastic job with Savion, but it's not just about Savion. Like, he's been active in helping other position coaches with recruiting. He's been active, in Ohio as well, where he has ties to. He does a fantastic job of building relationships with everybody in the recruitment, the kid, the high school coach, the trainer, whoever, the uncle. Like, he does it all. He genuinely builds relationships with everybody around a recruitment, and he does it early. Like, he was on Savion when Savion was a freshman. He was on Traynard Roberts when Roberts was a freshman. Like, he identifies guys early, gets in there early, builds those genuine connections, and he's a pro's pro, man. He does everything the right way. I think a lot of people, or a lot of coaches, could learn a lot from the way Tony Alfred handles his business on the recruiting trail. So I think TA is definitely still underappreciated. I told y'all when Michigan moved from Mike Hart to Tony Alfred that would be a massive upgrade, and I said it for a reason, and I think that Alfred has proven to be that on the recruiting trail. Mike Spencer says, seems like some in-state kids are dropping in the rankings. Who is likely to be a take, and who is at risk for being recruited over? I mean, the state of Michigan in 2027 is still really strong. You have 7 top 300 players, or in the Rivals 300, you have 7 recruits there. That is the most since the 2021 recruiting cycle, which had guys like Donovan Edwards, Damon Payne, Giovanni El-Hadi, Rayshawn Benny. Like, if you remember, that 2021 class in the state was super, super loaded, and it's the same for 2027. So some guys have dropped, sure, but I mean, you still have 7 top 300 players. I think the guys that Michigan would take now, obviously Dakota Warrant, he's one of the more important targets. We talked about him, when discussing the wide receivers. Jakari Lipsy is a kid they really like out of Kalamazoo. He's visited. I think Michigan has the early RPM lead, and I would agree with that. So they can be selective along the offensive line with 2 commits, but he's a kid that they would really want. Ricardo Kitchen would be a take for sure. I put in the prediction last year, and Steve Wiltfong recently joined me on that. So, the elite edge out of Muskegon, they would definitely take Anthony Cartwright. He's a top priority, a Rivals 300 prospect at tight end out of Detroit. So, those are guys that for sure Michigan would love to have in the class. So I recently wrote a story. Will Michigan land more than 4 in-state commits next cycle? And I would say, yeah. I mean, the guys I rattled off, those are 4 names already. And that's not even, counting some of the guys, some of the lower rated guys they like Jameer Henry, who's an 3-star offensive lineman, was in the top 300 out of King, or, also at King, a really, really intriguing athlete who I like is Daryl Flemister. I think some of those guys could end up being takes. So we'll see. But I mean, Michigan, I think next cycle, they're going to work inside out. This was a really national recruiting cycle where you see commits from, several different states. I think for 2027, and not as much, 0 in-state kids, not as much in Midwest influence. I think next cycle, it's going to be heavy in-state and Midwest with some, cherry picking national. So, but yeah, 2027 in-state, really, really talented. Tom says, I saw that Miles Smith is the new #1 player in Michigan for 27. Thoughts? Is Michigan involved here? Who makes these Rivals rankings for Michigan? Michigan is aware of Miles Smith. I think that's the wrong Miles Smith. That's some kid from LA. But the Miles Smith from Michigan, yeah, I'm not too familiar with him. He was, I don't even know if he was ranked before this update. And now he is the #1 player and a top 100 recruit. So, he's a guy that I just have to familiarize myself with. I'm just going to be honest. I don't know a ton about him. He's out of Farmington. You see he's still a 3-star on the industry, and in the 600s for Rivals. Obviously, they bumped him up into the top 100. He is going to visit Michigan next month. They haven't offered yet. I'd assume that would change in terms of who makes the rivals rankings. Direct all your all your ranking stuff to Charles Power. He is the director of rankings. Tom says, I just put in my prediction for Jamarion Vincent to Michigan. Are you going to join me? I'm not sure yet, man. The cornerback board is interesting. Like I said, they're picking up interest with CJ Brona. Hayden Finney's still out there. I think Michigan's still in a good spot to flip Jamarion Vincent, but it's kind of wait and see for me. Tom says, in your career, what position group has been the most challenging for you to evaluate? What position do you think you are better at evaluating than many of your peers? I do not really enjoy evaluating linebackers. It's very scheme specific. There's so many different variables, but their teams just look for so many different types of athletes there, different types of players. It's really tough to evaluate from a national perspective at linebacker. I think for Michigan, the scheme has stayed pretty consistent over the years in the transition from defensive coordinators from McDonald to Minter to Martindale, because they're all kind of under the same umbrella and run a very similar style scheme. But I think in general, I don't really enjoy looking at linebackers. For me, like, it's really three things with linebackers. Are they comfortable in coverage? Are they athletic? Can they run sideline to sideline? That's basically it. Because if you're a good athlete in today's college football world and you fit what Michigan does, you have a good chance of succeeding and outplaying your ranking like a Markel Dabney. The position I would enjoy the most, I guess, would be edge and defensive line. I think it's really interesting to evaluate those positions, mostly because I played edge in high school. So I feel like I have a better grasp of what they're trying to do. Like, if they're wrong arming pullers, or if they're just cutting pullers, or, how they're attacking the V of the neck, or just, simple things like that, are easier just because I grew up doing it. Probably helps out a little bit. And I think I've had a pretty decent success rate along the defensive, not just at edge, but at the defensive line in general. I was very high on Mason Graham, very high on Kenneth Grant. I would say those evaluations have worked out well. Lou says, I've seen there was a question about Nick Abrams, but throw in the Ross School of Business. Is there any comparison why he wouldn't flip? And then he asked an additional question. So starting off with Abrams, I think the Ross School of Business definitely helps, especially for a kid like Abrams, who is a high academic kid, goes to a really good high school in the Baltimore area, and whose father is a businessman himself. So that's a huge selling point for Michigan. But I think the relationships with Georgia are really, really strong. Like I said, he likes the linebacker tradition there. I think up to now, Georgia's probably been more willing to do more from an NIL perspective with linebacker recruiting than Michigan has. Lou also asked, does Michigan go after Leighton Von Brand, who's a Penn State or former Penn State commit, offensive tackle out of Delaware? Like I said earlier, Michigan can be selective with the offensive line. They already have two committed, Tristan Dare, Luis Esposito. So, no offer for him just yet. So we'll see. Lou also asked, EJ, why are we not seeing Micah Kaapana and Brady Prescorn? Both of these players had spent a lot of resources in their recruiting. Prescorn had an injury last year that I think was pretty severe. I don't know if he's completely recovered from that or not. And Kaapana, I think, got injured early this season. So I would just kind of chalk it up to injuries there. Hammers LA says, hypothetical question. If the NCAA passed a rule that recruits could sign their LOI anytime without waiting for signing day, thereby reducing flips, would that help or hurt Michigan? Michigan likes to see how things play out and, take advantage late like they did last cycle, and they're doing with a handful of prospects this cycle. So maybe hurt, but I don't think you'll ever really see recruits do that. Like, why would you sign an LOI when you can continue to negotiate NIL and there's so many gray areas? It just wouldn't make a lot of sense. Salty Rock 2 says, hey, EJ, when evaluating Donald Tabron, what helps you know he's elite is going to be a 5-star for that cycle, even though he's a sophomore? I think with quarterbacks, more than anything, the first thing I like to look for is, does this kid pop out right away? One of the coolest things about covering recruiting is every kid is different, and you never know which kid you're gonna I don't know, vibe with from a reporter standpoint. Um, and everybody has a unique individual personality, and like I like that. Like I wish I could cover like a Junior Colson or a JJ or a Donovan every cycle, but I also like that it changes every cycle. There's always new kids, and you get to know different people, so that makes it interesting. But the biggest thing I look for with a quarterback initially is, does he have that it factor? And the first time I ever met JJ McCarthy, it was clear he was a special kid. The first time I met Dante Moore, it was clear he was a special kid. The first time I met Donald Tabron, it was clear he was a special kid. So Don has that it factor. He's a gamer. He's a winner. He won a state title as a freshman at Cass, which is difficult to do. He is a guy that really, rallies his teammates. Everybody has respect for Don. I don't think anybody would say a bad word about JJ or Dante or Don. Like, he has that special type of charisma and leadership abilities. So I think that's extremely important, and something that's especially valuable at a program like Michigan, where you're talking about, a culture-driven place. Then obviously you have to look at the talent. You can't just be a great guy and then not perform. But Don, for his age, he has elite arm talent. He has a great frame with the ability to pack on a lot of weight. He's very cerebral. He's a guy who can hit all the throws at every level, short, intermediate, deep. He can do it all. He's not a guy who's super elusive as a runner, and we haven't seen a lot of him as a runner, but pocket presence is certainly there. The accuracy is certainly there. Elite arm strength certainly there. So Don just checks a lot of boxes on top of being a special kid as well. So that's why I would bank on Donald Tabron. Salty Rock 2 says Michigan is one of the 6 schools getting a visit from Kemon Spell because he is choosing to visit over other schools. Do you think there must be something there? Like I said, Michigan's going to swing for the fences. I think Michigan can sell him on, staying fresh and being a dynamic 1-2 punch with Savion Hyder. You can sell the fact that Michigan has supported 2 backs in the past, whether it was Son Haskins and Blake Corum, or, Donovan and Blake, or Donovan and Kalel. Like they've done 2 backs in the past, or even now, Justice Haynes and Jordan Marshall. So I think those are some selling points. And like I said, Tony Alfred just does a great job of building relationships, man. And like he's a dude on the recruiting trail. So I think there's something there, but I still think it'll be a tough one to win. Salty Rock says, have you evaluated DeAndre Bitten? Yeah, so DeAndre is the number 1 in-state recruit in 2028. He's actually ranked a few spots ahead of Tabron. I think Tabron's 29 overall, and Bitten's like somewhere in the top 15. I did get a chance to see both Tabron and DeAndre in the same 7-on-7 tournament in the offseason. He's number 11. But yeah, he was one of the best guys out there. He was super explosive. He was a go-to guy for Tabron, and he definitely looks the part early on for sure. And Michigan has done a great job in that recruitment. He's already been to campus multiple times. CFOS says, any Penn State commits being pursued by Michigan? Like I said earlier, not a ton of movement there just yet. They could look at Jazeal Hart or maybe a Davian Brown. Kemon Spell was a Penn State commit. They're obviously going hard for him in 27, but we'll see how it plays out. Robbie Mustafa says, "Hi EJ, how committed is Michigan investing NIL on top wide receiver targets like Sales and Goran?" It's still early for 27, but I think they will, as that cycle comes more into the spotlight, I think they will be very committed on the NIL front. I think they know, especially with the wide receiver room struggles this year, I think they know they have to invest in their investment, right? They paid a lot of money to get Bryce Underwood. They're going to have to pay a lot of money to get him some weapons. So I think they will invest in wide receiver next cycle. Before we move on, guys, we do have a message from one of our great sponsors, and that is MyPerfectFranchise. If you thought the Dollar Shave Club was great, MyPerfectFranchise has some amazing opportunities as well. Buying a franchise is a great way to establish independence without fear. You can go into this exciting industry. Your opportunity is awaiting, and it's all with Andy Luedecke. Have you ever been interested in expanding your horizons or trying something new in the business world? Your opportunity is waiting. Like I said, Andy Luedecke can work with you. His process is backed by extensive research and proven success. You can already have a job and do franchising on the side. Andy Luedecke will find the right opportunity for you. And you can often think of, maybe getting a Wendy's or a Bojangles or something like that. But, Andy has franchising opportunities in all types of spaces. You could even own a chain of what's a barber? Justa Cuts, you could do Great Cuts. You could own something like that, and you could use your razor and own the haircut place. So, you could even have the barbers all have the Diamond Michigan razors from Dollar Shave Club. And it all starts with Andy. Give him a call at 404-973-9901 or email him at andy@myperfectfranchise.net. All right, guys, we are past time, so we are going to do rapid fire. Dutchman says, when a player is visiting another school, are opposing coaches allowed to talk to them too? Yeah, Alfred Myson Johnson Cook, the East St. Louis kid, when he was on a visit to Ohio State. So, yeah, I mean, coaches can text them, but it's Saturday, so I'm assuming, they're playing. But I guess, if you're on a bye week, you could get in contact with them. There's no rule that permits when you can and can't talk to a recruit if it's during a contact period. Mike Spencer says, seems like some in-state kids are, we answered that one earlier. Mike came up with a super chat later on, so we appreciate Mike for that. Jeff Van Til just says, Halloween. He looks excited for Halloween. Scoot517 says, do you think Ron Bellamy gets replaced if he fails to land top targets in 2027? It will be a big recruiting cycle for Ron Bellamy, and even more important for boosters and those that support Michigan. They have to spend on that front and help Bellamy get a big-time wide receiver. Scoot517 says, any Michigan State commits you see us taking interest in if Jonathan Smith is fired? Their class is pretty bad, aside from like Samson Gash, who we've talked about plenty, and Michigan just hasn't gone in there. So I would say no. Customer service says, with Syracuse having a bad season, do we circle back to Calvin Russell? If he flips anywhere, I would think it'd be Miami. I mean, you can never rule anything out, especially with Michigan's ties there, but I don't really see it happening right now. Jason Wilbur says, what are you hearing from the sales camp after the short trip to Ann Arbor? I mean, he's been to Michigan plenty of times in the past. I think this was his 5th visit. It would have been nice to have him stay for the entire game, considering that Michigan turned it on in the second half of that contest. But I think Michigan, is in that top group, but, still has some work to do there. C. Foss says, for the 2026 class, what current commits are at risk, if any? And please list the 3 most possible flips to join the class. are at risk. The only one I'm really worried about right now is Julian Walker. I mean, luckily for Michigan, South Carolina, it doesn't look too hot, but with his dad being a strength coach, with him taking an OV over the weekend, that's still a situation to monitor closely. Flips to join the class. We've talked a lot about potential options, at corner. I think some of the names to know are Jamarion Vincent, CJ Bronaugh, Hayden Finney at linebacker, Nick Abrams, Braylon Hodges, and a flip per se, because he already decommitted from Michigan State. I think along the offensive line, they'll get one of Adrian Hamilton or Sean Stover, Hamilton being committed to Virginia Tech, Stover to Duke, and then Tommy Froman, who's committed to Miami of Ohio, intriguing tackle prospect. I think Michigan would is in a good spot to get him. Andrew Younger says, what are your measurables, EJ? Do you have any eligibility left? When I was in high school, I was 6'1", 210. So I would not be a quality edge recruit, which is why I was not ranked. I don't have the height or the length to be a quality edge. And now I've slimmed down to 175, and I would absolutely get blown away. And I don't have any speed to play wide receiver. I think I have good hands, but probably would be slow as molasses. Jason Wilbur says, any smoke to Andrew Olesh in the portal to Michigan since Prescorn is going to portal? That's a tough one to answer. I don't know. We'll have to wait and see if Prescorn actually gets in the portal. The portal's not open, but Olesh, they could revisit things if he decides to jump in the portal. I think with portal, it's still really early. Like we'll see, what guys actually jump in and what positions Michigan makes a move with. Tom says, looking to be a scary recruiter for Halloween. Who would be the scariest? Chucky, Mike Hart, or Brian Jean Mary? Well, I don't know how many recruits would actually be afraid of Chucky, because that is like way before their time. So they probably would just think he's a cute little kid. If he puts down the knife, I would give Chucky a hug. He's basically, God, I don't remember what those dolls were called. Like if you grew up in the 90s, then you know what doll I'm talking about. Like it had to have been based off of that, right? But anyway, I had one of those dolls. I think it was Buddy. He was supposed to be my friend. Everybody wants to hug their buddy when they're a kid, so nobody's gonna be afraid of Chucky like that if he doesn't have his knife. Mike Hart or Brian Jean Mary? Brian Jean Mary has spurts where he looks like he can recruit, and he has a track record of landing guys in the past, where Mike Hart has always settled for guys. So I would say Mike Hart I would least entrust, and so I would be most scared to have him as a recruiter. But as a coach, I would take him over Brian Jean Mary and Chucky for sure. Customer service says, will Michigan spend from the special fund on Spell, Tabron, and Bidden? I don't think they will on Spell, but maybe, considering they already spent for Savion. Tabron, no way you can let him leave, man. You can't let Oregon or USC come in here and steal Tabron. I think they would have to. He's the most important guy in 2028. And I would say, DeAndre would be right behind him. And if Michigan's going to spend at wide receiver in these future cycles, he would obviously be one to spend on. Yes, my buddy doll. I had one. I'm sure everybody had a My Buddy doll. I feel like our parents forced us to have one of those. But anyway, I'm assuming that is what Chucky is based off of, right? Again, I wouldn't be that scared of Chucky. I think he's kind of funny. He's entertaining, despite the fact that he kills people. So what, man? He's just a cute little guy. Anyway, appreciate it, guys. Hope you all enjoyed this show. Make sure to like this video, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and subscribe to thewolverine.com. If you can't get enough Michigan recruiting, head over there. Use that special promo code UM1. That's $1 for 2 month and get your Dollar Shave Club razor, get in the franchising world, and we will see y'all next week.